A group of people hiking in the snowy mountains suddenly encounter the small silhouette of a girl. The problem is that this girl is deep inside an ancient ice block. Just as they call out to each other to quickly contact the Mystical Magic Institute, they hear the girl speak. No one knows who this person really is, but they are certain of one thing: she is not of the same species as them. A contest is about to take place, a challenge between humans and 3 gods, unprecedented in history. This universe-shaking moment will be streamed live at various locations. Meanwhile, in the mysterious city of Ruin, while everyone is busy discussing various matters, including the 1 vs 3 event, a teenage boy appears on the street. He's pulling a suitcase, and it seems he had visited here 6 months ago. The boy begins to notice the battles being streamed prominently on large screens, humans fighting against aliens. The result is a miserable defeat. This outcome was already expected, so when the results were announced, no one was surprised or disappointed. The only credit those people deserved was for daring to participate in the competition. Seeing this, the young man, without saying a word, turns to leave. However, it's not that easy, as someone recognizes him as Faye. Not wanting to complicate matters, Faye hurriedly pulls his luggage away. At the Mystical Magic Institute's Ruin branch, Faye has changed into a neat uniform and enters the room amid surprised glances from everyone. The manager personally comes to greet him. Apparently, the person Faye had spent half a year searching for was a misunderstanding, and he returned because he heard she had met someone who looked identical. The person Faye wants to find is the red-haired sister who taught him to play games when he was young. The manager takes him to the 17th floor, chatting along the way. A year ago, a girl in the form of a god was discovered in the Ice Age area. This deity is somewhat different, as from ancient times, she had played hide and seek with humans at the bottom of the ocean, but fell asleep during play and was frozen. After a good sleep, she woke up 3,000 years later. Truly, divine time is just a concept, a value equivalent to the blink of an eye. By the way, this god is the embodiment of fire in the form of a dragon, claiming to be a former deity stripped of her power. Still, one cannot provoke her, as she has the ability to turn the city into a land of suffering. Soon the elevator doors open, and the conclusion is that the sister wants Faye to watch over this deity. The arrival of gods in the mortal world is unexpected, and no one dares to offend them, so Faye is the most suitable person. Stepping inside, there is indeed a deity passionate about games, with all sorts of gaming setups on display. Faye picks up 2 dice and correctly predicts the numbers that will show up. Nothing is random, everything is calculated by him. He just needs to hold the opposite face of the one he wants to appear on top, then apply enough force to make the dice rotate half a turn. After a while, it all comes down to skill determining win or loss. The one referred to as a deity has now appeared, and Miranda immediately introduces Faye to her. He is the best gamer of the era whom she requested to meet, a promising candidate who continuously won 3 rounds in the game with death since its release. And Faye asks, "Is this Lesa?" He is still stunned because this person looks too familiar. Seeing the situation heading towards a dead end, Miranda excuses herself, not forgetting to remind him to be careful. As soon as Miranda leaves, Lesa jumps in front of him. She doesn't refuse introductions or acquaintances, but suggests letting abilities speak for themselves by playing a game first. The game she created to kill time can be temporarily called the Self-Introduction Memory Challenge. The rules are similar to a card-matching game, but different in that one must match self-introduction content. For example, if Faye picks up 2 origin cards, Lesa will have to talk about her origin. If they don't match, no answer is needed. It's that simple and easy to understand. It's called a time killer, so it's light. She'll use her skills later. Before playing, Faye kindly reminds Lesa to shuffle the cards once more, because when laying out the cards to explain the rules, he inadvertently memorized all the sequences. It's just a habit. In the past, someone taught him to play until he was breathless. Lesa begins to find this person interesting, confident that not using memory but playing with skill against a deity on this tiny table would be a waste. Lesa immediately commands the cards to spin in the air, all with different orbits and speeds, making it impossible to know where they are. This is equivalent to a 3-dimensional memory challenge, and Faye remembers every card that's flipped. Lesa does too, which is why she changed the positions of the cards. Additionally, Lesa wants to increase the difficulty of the game, so she decides to add a rule. If in the original game, getting a pair means getting another turn, in Lesa's game, each person only gets 1 turn. The game officially begins. The atmosphere doesn't feel much like recreational play, but they have to deal with it. Miranda sits in her room secretly monitoring this contest. Lesa has no idea she's secretly installed a camera in the torn cardboard box in the room. In the first round, Lesa lets Faye go first, but unfortunately, he doesn't pick matching cards. Then it's Lesa's turn. She bends down to choose a card, inadvertently revealing something that's easy to distract people. Being a deity, Lesa has no concept of undergarments, but since he mentioned that playing games requires concentration, she respectfully adjusts her posture and decisively picks a pair of cards. Unfortunately, like Faye, she doesn't pick matching ones. Through her choice, Faye luckily selects a pair of origin cards. It's a successful start. Like other deities, Lesa comes from elements, what humans call the higher realm. Humans can only enter that place through special gates. Faye knows this because he used one 6 months ago. The idol gods give humans power to challenge deities, called Arise. Those who receive Arise from gods become disciples, who can challenge gods with superpowers or magic. All games with gods take place in elements, and the reward for winning is a portion of Arise power that can be used in the real world. This is absolutely necessary to explore new territories, as 93% of the continent is not compatible with human habitation. In the game with gods, losing 3 times means losing the right to challenge. Winning 10 times means passing. The purpose of humanity is to conquer it. The fact that Lesa is answering honestly and clearly in such detail is a bit unexpected for Faye. After all, he never requested to learn so much in depth. This time it's Lesa's turn to ask a question, and she also gets a pair, making the score tied at 1 each. "What's your name?" Lesa asks, based on the pair of cards she just matched. Faye introduces himself as Faye Phyllis, and as she can see, he was brought in by Miranda. Faye looks at a few cards in her hand and ponders. It turns out the information doesn't have to be confined to the cards. He can use them to spark new stories as he wishes. After a round of riddles, Lesa picks up a blank card, allowing her to ask whatever she wants. It's the card Faye was also aiming for but couldn't get. Seeing his favorite card in someone else's hand, he's heartbroken but has to accept it. Lesa's question is, what is his real purpose for approaching her? Absolutely no lying allowed. At this point, he can no longer hide and can only choose sweet words. Faye admits that he was sent by Miranda to monitor Lesa and discover her true identity. Contrary to Miranda's fear behind the screen, Lesa just sighs and returns to her normal state. She had guessed it from the beginning. The question was just to test his moral character. His honest obedience is commendable. The relationship between the two seems to have become somewhat closer. Lesa decides to drop formal speech and allows him to call her Leshi. Faye has met the expectations of this game. The cards he collected are about dreams, origins, and hobbies. From the start, he had no intention of determining a winner. The essence of the game is to remember but not take, as it also depends on remembering the original pairs. For example, Faye doesn't take the name card because he already knows her name is Lesa Leshi, and getting it would just waste a turn. Lesa is curious about what he would ask if he got a blank card. Regardless of whether she'll answer after hearing the question, he asks why she stays on Earth instead of returning to elements, and why she chose him when there are clearly more skilled people. Lesa answers the latter question first. She approaches and flips over Faye's hand. Only he, as a rookie, won 3 consecutive rounds. She wants to conquer the game with gods alongside him. Lesa came down to Earth to play with humans, but unexpectedly, the path to elements is one way. As a result, she lost her position. But if she wins against the gods 10 times, she can return to being a deity. Without giving him time to react, she pulls Faye along to the diving area to start the first game. Lesa has shown him that a lion off the mountain is still the king of the forest. Despite losing almost all her power, she can handle anything. 10 minutes earlier, they arrived at Elements, but the scenery here is identical to the city in the mortal world. While the two are looking around, Faye spots a familiar person also battling a boss here, saving them the trouble of forming a group. Mippo takes on the role of MC, governed by the Titan God. In total, there are 18 people, with a 14% win rate. The Titan God, bored of combat games, decides to switch to a chase. They must escape from the Titan God within the buildings, not allowed to leave the area marked by light. To win, they must escape from the boss in the permitted area. But just running doesn't guarantee victory. As for how to win, they'll find out by playing. That's all the explanation they get, and everyone has 300 seconds to hide. However, before anyone can run, they hear rapid footsteps around them, no rules given, no time to hide. Back to the current situation. The Titan God truly has terrifying destructive power. Faye and Lesa are running for their lives. The team leader proposes a strategy to split up and run into the buildings. Estelle feels that hiding deep enough will be safe, but Faye stops her. Clearly, the Titan already knows their general location. Estelle shouldn't separate from the team. Before he can finish speaking, the Titan appears. The god raises its foot and stomps down, crushing Estelle in front of all the players. When the Titan lifts its foot, Estelle is still there, but no longer an ally of Faye's group. She loses control and unleashes magic against her teammates. Her consciousness remains, but her body acts on its own. Despite the increased difficulty, Faye successfully discovers the hidden rule. If attacked by the Titan, one becomes a servant of the god. Estelle urges everyone to run quickly. If not for that hand shooting wildly, they would have appreciated her good intentions very much. but now they're in danger, all because of her impulsive nature that doesn't look before leaping. Another member gets hit. Currently, the god's side, including the Titan, has 5 people. Suddenly, the Titan turns and goes in the opposite direction, only to see Este charging back. If all except 2 get hit, then their side has 2 while the god's side has 17. Is the plan to use superior numbers to attack? Likely. By then, the Titan will have handed everything over to its servants. That half-colored body doesn't look balanced at all. Although both are in almost the worst situation, being hunted by their teammates, they're still fortunate to know that Este hasn't been eliminated. Because if she had lost, she would have been sent back to the human world long ago. Faye runs frantically but still has time to think. Finally, he comes up with a conclusion that changes the situation. While Este isn't paying attention, Faye dumps a garbage can over her head. Lesa seizes the opportunity to touch the lower part, returning Este's entire body to its original color, reviving a servant and unlocking the second hidden rule. Discovering a way to return to normal means the god won't let them be. The 2 are targeted by the Titan. Faye urges Este to hide, and then turns to accompany Lesa. Faye can completely understand Lesa's intentions without her saying much. Leaving the turn, they fortunately meet all their teammates, who hope Faye and Lesa won't give up on victory. The score is now 3 versus 16. They run into a building, cutting off their pursuers with Lesa's power. Currently, they're almost in a dilemma, with the Titan also searching for them everywhere, while the condition for victory remains a mystery. But it doesn't take long for Faye to realize the issue. Besides the chase and hide and seek games, there's a third game mixed in. Lesa catches on immediately, explaining why there are 2 losing conditions. The young duo have a plan, now it's about dividing tasks and separating. Lesa is responsible for leading people ahead, leaving Faye space to work. The old Titan destroys the surrounding buildings, finally the commercial building, and checks. Faye is forced into a corner of the roof and immediately receives his reward, a thunderous punch of epic proportions that sends dust flying into the sky. Everyone thinks this is the end, but no, it's not that easy. When the entire building is destroyed, the game ends. This is the third hidden rule of the game. Faye is revived thanks to his skill, or more accurately, he wasn't eliminated but successfully preserved his life. He exposes the hidden rule of the game as a reversey game. Think of it as a chase, but the entire city plays the role of the game board. The god chases, people run, servants are created, and people rescue. Clearly the sequential order when playing reversey. When touched, the upper half of the body changes color, corresponding to flipping the piece. The entire city is a square. The game ends when the entire board is filled. If it's a chase game, then when the entire playing field is destroyed and can no longer be played. In the end, whichever side, human or god, has more members wins. Now is the moment to turn the game around. They will use these rules to claim victory. The entire building is destroyed, and clearly, the god has lost the battle. The 3-hour and 31-minute battle ends with humanity's victory. It's been over a month since someone won again. Faye returns to Lesa, who is reviewing yesterday's event. Seeing him enter, Lesa turns and wonders what his wish would be if he won. Obviously, he wants to find his long-lost sister from back then. When he was young, not knowing her name, Faye just called her Sister 2. She taught him to play many games, but suddenly, on a fine day, she disappeared. She said they would meet again, but again could be anytime. The only thing he remembers about her is her red hair, exactly like Lesa's. Do the two have any connection? Lesa bursts into laughter. She has been asleep for 3,000 years. This is like a gentle reminder for Faye to remember not to treat anyone as a replacement for someone else. Lesa pulled Faye up to find Miranda to request forming a group, but the Mystical Magic Institute recommends that a group should have at least 10 members. Based on data from over 30 years, defeating gods has been difficult, and people rely on numbers with hopes of overwhelming them. With 9 people or fewer, the win rate against gods is below 4%. With 10 people it's 9%, and with 20 people it's only 11%. There's only one god, but the human side can have as many members as desired. Nevertheless, it's best to have an appropriate number of players. Miranda suggested that Lesa could form alliances with groups that don't have enough members yet. She also asked Faye to find worthy companions for Lesa. These tasks should have been the responsibility of administrative management, but obviously, they couldn't be as professional as the two of them. At best, they just look at reports to objectively select excellent members, but it would be better if Faye selected them personally. Faye registered for recruitment through the electronic board system, and interested people would proactively contact him. However, they still needed to exchange directly to avoid conflicts or opposing opinions. This is the group registration area. They spent some time waiting at the reception desk to see if anyone would come, and then directly communicate with them. Faye knew the leader of the fire group, Asuran. Faye called, and the other party immediately picked up. Faye expressed his wish to join Asuran's group, and he agreed without hesitation. However, when Faye mentioned that the deity Lesa would also join, the man's expression changed. Asuran hung up abruptly, not letting Faye say anything more. But Faye called back, not giving up. The other party was uncomfortable and didn't dare to look directly. They really didn't want to accept Lesa. Being a former deity, she usually doesn't ignore it when she's disparaged. One team, after losing to a deity, was frustrated. They got drunk and cursed loudly that playing with gods was nonsense. Just then, the dragon god, or rather Lesa, was passing by. As a result, those two disciples were beaten so badly they had to be hospitalized. Lesa tried to deny responsibility, saying she just patted them on the shoulder, forgetting to control her strength, so she was a bit forceful. Asuran continued, saying that despite her cute appearance, she's extremely petty. So although he hoped they could reunite, if Lesa was included, Asuran would have to decline. Staying alive was more important. Before hanging up, Asuran also made a crude comment about the goddess's chest. Luckily for him, he wasn't there, or else Lesa would have definitely punched him until all his teeth fell out. Faye continued his search for teammates, targeting a group with a female leader, but with a very good game analyzer. Teams that compete with deities must have an analyst to create strategies and a coach to guide players. Later, Faye contacted Yuki, the leader of a friend's team. It started well, with Yuki welcoming Faye to the team and ready to make a place for him until Faye mentioned Lesa. The reaction was not unexpected. Yuki screamed and immediately hung up. This attitude proved that Lesa had again caused trouble with people. Indeed, over the past 6 months, in her free time, she often practiced playing games with humans in the underground arena. When she first competed, she met Yuki, and unfortunately, not knowing how to control her strength, she accidentally sent the person to the hospital. Lesa was kind enough to visit the patient, but Yuki only managed to scream before fainting. Actually, Lesa just wanted to understand humans. She had read many books hoping to integrate into the community. It's okay though, if no one would accept them, they would create their own group. A team isn't just about having enough members, but also about understanding each other. Plus, they needed to find someone with convenient abilities to play with gods. While pondering, the person they needed appeared. It was exactly the useful superpower Faye was considering: instant teleportation. Faye thought someone possessing this type of energy would be sought after by all teams, but he still secretly followed her. As a result, when the small girl approached the counter, she took out a retirement form, which Lesa immediately burned. Faye and Lesa didn't know who this girl was, but she was very familiar with them. Aren't these the two people, the dragon deity and the rookie, who have been hot topics lately? Recognizing them, the girl immediately bowed her head and apologized for being impolite. Although she hadn't done anything wrong, Faye suggested treating her to ice cream while they talked. With food, everything would go smoothly, and the girl nodded in agreement. Her name was Pearl Diamond, 16 years old. With a record of 1 win and 1 loss against gods, Faye was confused. To defeat a god shows capability, which is why she could freely move between floors. Fighting just one glorious battle is enough to earn people's respect, but losing 3 times ends everything, so everyone wants to win. However, retiring after 1 loss seemed too self-deprecating. While Faye was deep in thought, he had ordered 32 ice creams, and Pearl enthusiastically returned his kindness by eating the entire table of ice cream, leaving nothing. Now Pearl truly revealed the issues troubling her. The main reason for her retirement was peer pressure. She had inadvertently swapped positions with the team leader while running away, causing the entire team to fail. This meant she could use 2 types of teleportation, using teleport to move both people and objects, and using ship cheat to swap positions. Actually, her ability has its flaws. Ship cheat only works on objects she has touched within the past 3 minutes, and the timing isn't fixed for everything. Because of her, 3 teammates were defeated and retired. Lesa consoled her, saying that Pearl already had the ability, and if she lost, Faye wouldn't blame her. However, the shadow of the past was too great, and Pearl refused and ran away. Faye wasn't going to stop there. He intended to find out about the female dormitory where Pearl was staying. He wanted to persuade her, not wanting her to fear games for the rest of her life. They quickly tracked down the address where Pearl lived. Because she always used teleportation, she had forgotten to lock her door for years without realizing it, allowing them to easily enter her home in search of her. As luck would have it, Pearl was changing clothes, and seeing this, the deity Lesa, showing her perverted nature, rushed forward. Finally, they all sat down to talk. Pearl felt she wasn't worthy of being in Faye's group. Today, she had brought gifts to meet her old teammates to apologize, but they didn't accept them. When she tried to find the team leader, others told her she didn't have the right. Faye suggested that making amends was enough, so why quit playing? He offered to help, and finally, moved by his sincerity, she nodded and agreed to join. This comeback might still face many difficulties, but they would see. At least she wouldn't have to regret it for the rest of her life. On the day she and her old teammates gathered at the entrance to the game, everyone's eyes carried prejudice. This time, the challenge was truly terrifying. A level that almost no one had passed yet. The god of despair who has made many contestants turn back, Yuros. Pearl's teleport could only be used within a distance of 30 meters, making it almost meaningless when falling from such a height. Lesa quickly used her power to reduce their falling speed, allowing them to slowly land on Yuros' body. Faye approached the team on the other side, and fortunately, they also wanted to cooperate with him. The leader spoke first, introducing himself as Ovan, the head of the Inferno group. Before even starting, the Inferno team had already lost several people to the sea creature. It's called Leviathan. They wait for people to fall from Yuros and then become ferocious piranhas. The mate of this area, known as Mip, was sitting on the ground. Faye picked him up and asked about the game rules. There's a mysterious keyword that, if the god says it, you win. Each game has a different word, and the losing condition is when all players are eliminated. The length of Yuros is 10,000 meters, and there might be hints at the head. Suddenly, electric sparks erupted around them, trapping the players in an area. If they couldn't find the forbidden word, they couldn't escape. It must be related to this world. Everyone tried to guess, and the good news was that they had already said the keyword. But the bad news was that the electric net was getting stronger every second, and no one knew what they had said. Faye pondered and came up with the correct answer, the word pain. The electric net turned off, proving that Faye had guessed correctly. After leaving that place, they tried to work together to make Yuros reveal the forbidden keyword. Despite everyone's efforts, nothing happened. Lesa wanted to show off some of her power, so she gathered a huge force and struck down. As a result, Yuros didn't cry out in pain, but the Inferno team lost a member. Ovan, on behalf of the entire team, accepted Lesa's apology. Clearly, they needed to hit a weak point to make the deity open its mouth. But Mip said he had forgotten the hidden rule. If a certain action is performed, something will happen. That's the first hidden rule. Next, if the first rule is met, within a certain time, something can be done. While Faye was calculating various paths, Pearl jumped into his lap. The scary blob-eating creatures under the sea were so terrifying that she instinctively sought support, successfully making Lesa jealous. However, there was no fiery brawl here. Lesa just came forward, pulled Pearl away, encouraged her, and then they both moved on together. They approached the tail section and found a scale that was a different color from the rest. Pearl felt this was the weak point that would make the god cry out in pain. Although Faye had a bad feeling, he didn't stop her, and the result was a trap. Her impulsive, thoughtless action affected the entire team. With dwindling numbers, Ovan, despite being the team leader, began to get angry. Faye stood in front of her. They had to try to know right from wrong. If Pearl hadn't hit it, Faye would have done it anyway. The important thing was that they had to consider all possible winning scenarios. Faye had figured out the hidden rule thanks to this attack. This was the fourth hidden rule: attacking the tail would result in a counterattack. If this trap had been intentional, the number of casualties would have been much higher than 4. The next thing to do was to verify the second hidden rule. No one stood up to guarantee the basis, but the game had no time limit. Losing because they dared to try was better than losing because they were all beaten to death. People began to lose patience, turning to blame all their self-perceived faults on Pearl. Lesa couldn't stand it anymore. This bunch that liked to find scapegoats really made her eyes swell. If they gave up, they wouldn't need to wait for the boss. She would punch them all right now. They couldn't understand why a deity like Lesa would speak up to protect an ordinary person who was dragging them down like Pearl. These fools' nonsense made her lose even the enthusiasm to be angry. What infuriated her was that these people weren't fully committed to the game. The fact that Faye hadn't given up meant they still had a chance to win. He stood up and made a bold decision to attack once more. There might be more casualties, but they would definitely win. Lesa struck the tail hard. A light beam erupted, killing all the other players, leaving only 3 people safe thanks to hiding behind Lesa's shield. They saw the Leviathan starting to move. They seemed calmer than before. So the 3 successfully unlocked the second hidden rule. Fill in the blank with 3 words: can ride Leviathan. They jumped on the Leviathans and entered the final round. Faye found a shiny eye, saying that if they crushed it, they would successfully bring glory back. But this had a defense system, and the time allotted for riding the Leviathan was almost up. Faye, quick-witted, exchanged a glance with Lesa, and she got the signal and left immediately. Having a partner who understands your intentions saves so much effort. Then he whispered the plan into Pearl's ear. Although she was very surprised, she agreed to follow it. After all, Faye was the only door that could lead them to victory. If not him, then who? Afterward, Faye jumped onto another Leviathan. Lesa managed to break through the protective layer, and the lasers fell down. Faye jumped up, activated the defense mechanism, making Yuros continue to attack. But instead of confronting directly, he let Pearl finish the rest. She opened a teleportation gate to bring him back. The light beam was redirected back to the eye, making the plan a perfect success. Yuros screamed in pain, and humanity won the greatest victory in history. Those who witnessed this historic moment all applauded and cheered loudly. Yuros admitted defeat, revealing herself as a pretty girl. "This is a fragment from my eye," she said, offering it as a special reward for the first person to defeat the undefeated deity. "Holding it in your hand will surely summon Yuros." She promised that next time, she would come up with an even harder game, still hoping they could play together. The first ever victory against Yuros became a catalyst that excited everyone. Members at Ruin simultaneously submitted applications to participate in the game, filling up the organization's schedule. Now, even if they wanted to, they would have to make appointments a month in advance. Although they couldn't enter the world to fight with deities immediately, they could arrange another place for temporary battles, called the World Game Tour. Athletes from all over the world were invited to participate in the Olympics. After the day Yuros was defeated, many requests to participate were sent to the branch. Because disciples who defeated a deity in such a difficult game were worshipped as heroes by the whole world. On the wheel were cities that had extended invitations so far. Pearl took on the responsibility of throwing a random dart to choose a tour for the group. She selected the Holy Line Maria, so all three packed up and set off to fight. Disciples, after retiring, used the power of Arise to protect cities and explore the outside world. They arrived at the city of Holy Spring Maria, the train running day and night on tracks. Finally, after much hardship, they reached their destination. The two girls were extremely excited about this fresh atmosphere. Suddenly, they caught someone's gaze, or more accurately, an extremely prominent interface that caught their attention. A girl was holding a banner warmly welcoming Faye. It seemed a bit strange because they didn't know who this person was. Miranda hadn't mentioned sending an acquaintance to meet the three. When the other party recognized Faye, he ran away as fast as he could. However, the other person was a superhuman with enhanced physical abilities. She proactively introduced herself. Her name was Nina Regulus, a former disciple of the Maria branch. She said she wanted to become his woman, meaning subordinate. But Nina was so flustered she mixed up her words, sounding a bit creepy though her intentions were very pure. After the stream, she had decided that only he was worthy of being her master. Cooking, washing, Nina could do it all, even scrubbing his back in the bath. Lesa and Pearl pulled each other aside, looking at him with contemptuous eyes. What a womanizer, capable of anything, even thinking of letting a girl scrub his back. Nina had already kneeled down, with crowds of people passing by, spectators stopping to watch. Extremely embarrassing. Faye was planning to retreat, run first and think later. Nina looked up, didn't see him, and hurriedly followed, accidentally rushing onto the main road. A car sped along the road, heading straight for where Nina was standing. Of course, she wasn't an ordinary person. She used her skill to reverse momentum and kicked the innocent car away. As for Faye and the other two, they had successfully escaped and run to the Mystical Magic Institute's Maria branch. The manager looked somewhat fierce. The uncle put his hand on Pearl's shoulder intending to introduce himself, but she was already scared and ran to the security guard, asking them to remove that big uncle. He wasn't a pervert. The uncle was the manager, Bariga Irons. The management office was on the 8th floor, making the two Lesa and Pearl tired from the stairs. This time's game, the main event, was playing with gods for 3 days. The entire stadium had been rented for cheering. 10,000 audience seats were fully booked, and the citizens of Maria would cheer for everyone. Additionally, Irons wanted to ask them to resolve a friendly match between cities to strengthen relationships tomorrow. They very much wanted to compete with talented people like Faye. Commemorative photos hung all over the room. All the guests were disciples from other cities. Black uniforms represented the best team of the branch, and yellow stripes were characteristic of the headquarters of the Mystical Magic Institute. A young man entered, apparently coming to greet the visiting guests. His name was Dark, and although he was a rookie a year ago, he became the fastest person in history to form a group and defeat a god in his first match. His current record was 3 wins and 1 loss, and he served as the representative of the Maria branch. Dark came not just to greet. He recognized that Faye had real ability and wanted to recruit him to his team. Currently, he was recruiting rookies from all over the world to form the strongest team in history, completely dominating the game with gods. Of course, Faye refused, and he didn't insist, turning to leave immediately. Soon they would be teamed up with Maria's disciples, so Faye wanted to see how they played. By coincidence, that Nina also appeared here. Her record was 3 wins and 3 losses, and she had retired just a month ago. She had carried out directives from the team leader and cared deeply for teammates, but was forced to lose because teammates surrendered, completely opposite to Pearl. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. They thought it was Manager Irons, so they opened it without thinking. Pearl was shocked to find that it was Nina, the very person they had been discussing. Despite wearing a hat and mask, they easily recognized her. Seeing her identity exposed, Nina threw away her hat and glasses and ran frantically, with Faye not even having time to stop her. He just wanted to talk, and Nina didn't know why she had to run. She was standing catching her breath when Dark approached. 2 years ago, they were appointed to the same class. People said that between him and her, one of the two would lead this generation. But now he survived, and she retired. He didn't come to mock her, just to let Nina know that she was suited for a stronger team, namely his. Nina didn't want that. She only liked Faye. Nina proactively proposed a bet, and she had placed her faith in Faye's team. Very quickly, the day of battle arrived. The sound of enthusiastic cheering echoed to the high heavens. Before the match began, Nina still came to give Faye instructions. You probably already know that their opponent is Dark, a true genius with a keen sense for games, but she still hoped he would win. She would be in the stands cheering for Faye. Dark came here not as a representative of the city, but as an individual who wanted to fight Faye as a gamer. The passion was so intense that Faye was dazed for a few seconds, not forgetting to praise the young man before him. He thought he was cold, but apparently not. The game they would play would be selected randomly from thousands of games in the hall. And this time, Faye had to face Sugoroku, a tactical card game. Sugoroku doesn't use dice. Dark admitted he had no experience in this game, so victory would depend on skill. It was a 2 versus 2 game. Dark selected a person named Kurlik, his subordinate. Lesa voluntarily gave the stage to Pearl and retreated to the stands to cheer. She hoped today would still bring glory. The arena had 2 conditions for victory. Either reach the goal first, which was 44 spaces away, or use traps or magic cards to reduce the opponent's 20 life points to 0 when their turn ends. Before selecting characters, each player would receive 5 randomly distributed magic cards. The cards were divided into 3 types: attack, recovery, and special. For example, the magic card Mega Flame would deal 2 points of damage to a player. Additionally, used cards would be placed in each team's storage chest. There were a total of 72 magic cards. Card information could be accessed at any time, meaning it was publicly disclosed. This was an intense battle of wits. Faye had a very powerful hidden skill card, but had to choose the healer representative to have a chance to use it. Pearl had a rare magic card that could be activated when life points were 5 or below, and she had only 1 card left in hand. First, they needed to choose professions. While the traveler could go further, the healer carried the responsibility of saving lives and could salvage the situation. In short, these 2 professions were sustainable long-term choices that could lead to the goal. On the other hand, the mage and trapper were completely opposite. Both could inflict damage on opponents. However, Faye's team had too many recovery cards to engage in direct combat. Faye didn't want to choose the long route to reach the goal. Nevertheless, they needed a strategy, a way to play outside the box and still win. Faye resolutely chose the traveler, and Pearl followed by taking the healer. Dark and Kurlik both took mages. Could it be that the opposing team planned to use firepower to eliminate their life points? The game began. Players could choose any card from 1 to 6. Yellow spaces allowed drawing 2 magic cards, silver spaces 1 card, and red spaces were trap areas, inflicting 7 unavoidable damage points on the player. Faye calculated ways to reach the goal, wondering whether to attack first or defend first. The game opened with players placing their dice cards face down, replacing the usual dice. Faye finally decided to reach the goal first. Whoever rolled higher would go first. In case of a tie, whoever was quicker would get the advantage. Otherwise, they would lose their turn. Dark wasn't idle, but kindly reminded him to consider the pros and cons of his choices. Faye didn't care because he had calculated from the beginning. He didn't use the traveler's ability here. He couldn't directly exchange cards, but there were cards with similar effects. He understood and declared the end of his turn after making his choice. It was Dark's turn, and he spread his hands to play his maximum card. Passionate Melody was a hidden skill card specifically for mages, affecting all players and lasting until the end of the game. When a player takes damage, 1 more point is added to the damage. However, no additional damage will be generated due to the card's effect itself. This means that when attacking, Dark also receives additional damage points. Pearl chose a fairly safe card, but Kurlik attacked continuously. Currently, they had already taken 4 points of damage. At this rate, they would perish as their life points were completely drained. Pearl had 40 spaces left to the goal. Faye had 38. Even with the best luck, drawing a 6, it would still take 7 turns to reach. Kurlik continued to attack frantically. Faye reminded himself not to waver, then turned to discuss with Pearl that she shouldn't try to hold onto cards because the opponents were mage type. Continuing to take hits would result in early death. Starting the second round, Pearl decided to counterattack Kurlik and then received equivalent damage due to the effect of Dark's previously played card. After just a few turns, Pearl's health was nearly depleted. After several unavoidable attacks, Pearl was finally left with only 1 life point. She had to send a card to the storage chest to reduce damage by 8 points, not to mention that as a healer, she would get a reduction of up to 9 points. But this played right into the other team's hands. The two combined their cards to nullify Pearl's technique. causing her not only to fail to reduce any damage, but to receive an additional 3 points. Faye immediately supported Pearl from behind, helping her reduce damage by 2 points. If the opposing team knew how to attack together, our team also knew how to combine the power of friendship. Faye lost 5 points for not being able to block Dark's attack, but created an opportunity for Pearl and recovered 10 life points. Very quickly, they reached the third turn. Faye drew a 4, but 4 steps forward was a trap that would reduce his life points by 7. However, they still had a way to avoid it by using the Traveler's skill card. It could be said that Pearl's move was quite intelligent, but not enough. The mage's attacks were still more severe. Pearl was matched one-on-one with Kurlik, and Dark was not outside the game. He provided support that made Kurlik's cards even more powerful. With 8 life points, all 8 were deducted. Faye didn't accept this result and rushed to rescue. Although Pearl preserved her life, she was trapped by Dark's strategy, which sealed all her cards until the end. Kurlik had one more card, an automatic magic. When the turn ended, all players would take damage corresponding to the cards drawn in that turn. Those who drew 4 or more cards would take 10 damage instead of the number of cards drawn. Pearl had only 5 life points left while the damage was up to 10. Never accepting a predicted result when the player hadn't reached the goal. Pearl especially wouldn't accept it. She wasn't an obstacle for Faye, so she would prove to them the power of her brain that had been nerfed for so long. She would use a strong card, accepting 20 points of deduction to drag Dark, who also had only 4 life points left, down with her. The life and death battle kept flipping back and forth, and Dark was skilled at continuously bringing the situation to its final point. But Pearl was determined to win. She wouldn't allow anyone to walk over her again. Just the last card was enough, because it was the strongest one. The card Faye had hidden in the second battle was secretly passed to Pearl this time. She drew the card from the chest, which was his card, something that was both a retreat and a path to victory. Actually, from the beginning, Faye's team had chosen to attack with damage, to cut off the opponent's breathing. But because they had cards full of recovery effects, they had to take a roundabout route and play psychological games. Whoever was weak would be swept along immediately. Perhaps Dark was too contemptuous of his opponents and became careless. Anyway, victory still slipped from his grasp. Now, whatever was said was useless. Dark's life points went to 0, and Pearl and Faye's team had won. Despite losing, Dark wasn't discouraged. On the contrary, he found it very interesting. Having fought such a satisfying battle, he saw even more that Faye's abilities were worthy of being his opponent, and Dark would strive to rise even higher because of it. Faye looked at this scene and sighed. Lesa and her 2 friends went to the market to hang out. While Lesa was actively raiding toy stores, Pearl was holding a bunch of food. Unexpectedly, 2 girls ran up wanting to take photos and get Lesa's autograph. Back in Ruin, there had never been such a precedent. Perhaps this was a privilege for guests. Not only Lesa but also Faye was dragged into this impromptu fan meeting. A long line of people queued along the road, making the space suddenly seem cramped. Pearl, seeing Faye surrounded like that, thought she must be as hot as a superstar. She spread her arms to welcome fans, waited for a while, but sadly, out of all those people, not a single one approached Pearl. She cried and decided to comfort her stomach, which was also crying tears, with sweets first. The entire morning was spent just signing names and shaking hands with fans. Doing unfamiliar things was truly challenging. Lesa approached him, saying not only those girls, but she also wanted to ask for his autograph. Without paper, Faye suggested going to the stationery store to buy colored paper, but Lesa stopped him. Writing on this small ribbon would be fine. Faye was a bit shy but still came to sign it for her. She held the ribbon tightly in her hand, saying she would keep it very carefully. Nina was hiding behind a bush, secretly jealous. She also wanted to stand rightfully beside him like they did, at least as a friend. Suddenly, there was a commotion from the bakery at the end of the street. It turned out to be Dark. Was he also doing fan service? Though it looked that way, he was actually a food streamer. There was a rumor that the revenue from one broadcast was already double the income of Disciples. Kurlik had been standing there for some time already. Dark was very good. A strong person with a sharp mind, excellent mobility, and handsome face, so being popular was only natural. Kurlik and he were just business partners. If they weren't on the same team, she wouldn't have time to interfere in his private life. After saying this, she bowed and proudly left. It was hard to understand why her words and actions contradicted each other. Kurlik went all the way to the glass door and took Dark's camera. They decided not to stand there anymore and should call out the little girl who had been dodging and hiding all day like she was doing something shady. He had noticed this from the beginning. Nina was indeed very poor at disguising herself. Since there was no point in hiding anymore, Nina decisively walked straight to him. She had watched the performance. Because of this, she was even more determined to become his partner. Although she had lost and could no longer enter the match, she could still play the role of an analyst for them. Of course, he didn't agree. She could have her own role without serving anyone. Nina was about to turn away after being rejected but was called back by him. He arranged to meet her tomorrow at the Mystical Magic Institute. Finally, they entered the main event, the battle with the gods. To meet the standard of 10 people from headquarters, 12 more people were selected from the Maria branch. They had already entered the game, while Nina stood above, not understanding what purpose her presence served. She had thought all night but couldn't figure out why she still had to come here. Faye said, "Just stay there and cheer for everyone first." Although she didn't fully understand Faye's intention, even if she hadn't been planned for beforehand, she would still stand there and cheer with all her heart. Then all three entered inside. Dark had been there for a long time. This area was burning hot, no different from a desert. Chimera was the team leader of the team collaborating with Faye, Team Archel. This was Faye's stage, not a win or lose battle with Dark, but he was looking forward to seeing Faye's moves. The ground shook violently, and after the tremor, a mysterious pyramid emerged from the sand surface. The MIP for this stage only appeared now. MIP counted the number of people and found 2 fewer than the number of players the deity had anticipated. But since it was time, they had to proceed even with missing members. First came the welcome gift. Each person received a green flower. Losing it would result in elimination, so they had to be extremely careful. When the flower buds bloomed, they would divide into 3 colors: yellow, black, and white. The yellow one was the sunflower, and among all the distributed flowers, there was only one. The black one was poisonous, and there was also only one. The white ones were sandflowers, and all remaining 13 flowers were of this type. They needed to bring the sunflower to the shrine at the top of the pyramid, called the Race for the Sun, with a destination 23 kilometers away. Without obstacles, Lesa would only take 5 minutes to get there. But it wasn't going to be that easy. MIP's main deity also had a defense team set up to steal flowers. The mentioned characters quickly appeared before them. They looked just like cute cats, but were of terrifying size, and they would steal people's flowers. Conversely, if people stole flowers from these beasts, they would leave. In case the flower was stolen, the entire team would lose, and the deity's team also had a sunflower. So stealing flowers from these fierce beasts was also part of the strategy. Sandflowers were just for disguise. Whether they were stolen or not didn't affect victory or defeat. However, if they mistakenly stole the poisonous flower, the entire team would be afflicted with a debuff. Besides having the identity of the person holding the sunflower revealed, the entire team would be paralyzed for 5 seconds, during which they couldn't defend themselves. This applied equally to both teams. This match tested acting ability, intuition, and strategic coordination. They could exchange information about who was holding which flower. Just lifting the flower petal a bit would reveal it. Faye had a sandflower, Pearl had the sunflower, and Kurlik had the poison flower. Going to the pyramid at the end of the horizon would take several thousand meters. On the way there, the deity and the cat golems would chase them. Those creatures were quite fast. Escaping them required skill. They began to exchange flower positions, with Lesa holding the poison flower to misdirect. When asked who among them were superhumans, Kurlik raised her hand, surprising everyone. They had thought she was a magic mechanism type. Kurlik's arise was physical enhancement in an instant. She also knew self-defense, so entrusting the sunflower to her wouldn't be a bad idea. The rules weren't binding, so they could exchange flowers during the game. However, while playing, if a situation arose where, even for just a split second, the number of flowers in hand dropped to 0, they would be immediately eliminated. For example, throwing flowers to each other was not allowed. Even using teleportation abilities, there would be a moment when the flower left the hand, which would count as elimination. Players in a tight spot could throw flowers to others, but the person losing the flower would receive a red card and be eliminated. What was needed here was perfect teamwork from all 15 people. Dark had already approached but didn't claim leadership, instead asking Faye to direct positions for everyone, which surprised Kami, who opened her mouth in astonishment. Normally, Dark would point 5 fingers saying the person holding the sunflower could only be himself, who said he was a gentleman. Recalling his promise to Nina not long ago, Dark didn't explain but said he wanted to see how his opponent would adapt. Faye decided to mix up the flowers and redistribute them to everyone, this time keeping it secret even from teammates. Only the person holding a flower would know what they had. He did this because if the entire team identified who was holding the flower, they would unconsciously protect that person, revealing it to the deity. To successfully deceive opponents, they must first deceive their teammates. With the strategy finalized, the main deity, Lord Manhat, entered the field. In his hand was also a flower, which could potentially be the sunflower. The battle of wits officially began. The deity challenged them to guess which of the 15 present was holding the sunflower. Both Faye and Lesa claimed to be holding the sunflower. It's possible that both were holding either yellow and black flowers, or that both were lying. The cats began to engage, but their numbers were somewhat incorrect. Initially, there weren't said to be so many. The ratio was 15 versus 1 in 667 soldiers. Kurlik asked permission to go ahead. Even without activating her power, she was still capable of outpacing her teammates. Seeing this, the golems also accelerated, now reaching 60 kilometers per h. At this rate, they would all be caught within half a minute. Both called for Kurlik to fall back. A cat jumped high and began to attack. It created a sandstorm. Those nearby would be caught, while those too far would be punished with greater magic. Some team members had already had their flowers stolen, and the cats were close on their heels. Dark performed an incredibly beautiful move that made even Pearl applaud. Not paying attention, she immediately got her clothes torn by a cat. Then Pearl couldn't dodge in time and was held tight. They looked cute but were actually perverted. Kurlik stepped in to help. She hated cats with no shame the most. Seeing the situation deteriorate, Lesa had to act. She delivered a punch that cracked the desert surface, causing cats to drop into the deep trench below. This was elements, so the ground quickly returned to normal. An oasis appeared ahead. How could there be water with a whole oasis looming there? It was clearly a trap. Kurlik thought they should ignore it, but Pearl still needed a change. The golems continued to pursue. The previous tactics had become useless, as they grew stronger after each attack, so the ratio was now very uneven. Kami was also blocked. Fortunately, she was holding a sand flower, so they only lost numbers but didn't lose the game. Kami used her entire body to hold back the cats to give everyone time to run to victory. The distance was still 600 meters, but the team was down to just 5 people, while the opposing side had 1 in 237, not counting the deity. Already firmly holding the flower in his hand, he believed that being caught would be the end. Hiding wouldn't bring any benefit, so it was convenient to hold it whenever possible and adapt quickly. Kurlik planned to use all her strength to run, but because they exceeded the allowable distance, the cats began to use tools to attack from afar. Although Pearl had opened a teleportation gate to save Dark, he couldn't escape in time, and the result was still disappearance in a cloud of dust and sand. Kurlik went crazy, thinking of turning back to solo the entire mountain range, but Faye stopped her. Kurlik said she was holding a sand flower, so she could delay them. The 2 out of 3 people holding flowers should move forward. Lesa said she wasn't holding the sunflower or poison flower either, so she volunteered to stay behind and hold off the fat cats. Outside, everyone was actively monitoring the battle. Even Kami didn't know who among the 4 was holding the flower, as Lesa or Kurlik might be lying to misdirect the deity. While Nina was deep in thought, Dark approached. He had kept his bet to protect and support Faye to victory. Having fulfilled his duty as the loser, she should watch until the end. The battle of the man Nina had chosen, Faye said in his hand, was the sunflower. If they brought it to the pyramid, they would win. But the final boss was the supreme deity. A group of soldiers emerged from the ground and seized Faye. He decided to protect the flower in his hand and threw it to Pearl. She didn't hesitate for a moment, rushing forward, and in the moment when the deity wasn't paying attention, she teleported instantly. One might have thought she would head straight to the Avenue of Glory, but no, Pearl chose a roundabout path, stole the deity's flower, and held it up in triumph. However, what Pearl couldn't anticipate was that it was the poison flower. The entire team was electrocuted for 5 seconds. The deity's real sunflower was at the oasis, the place they had passed by earlier. Not only that, but the poison flower also exposed the position of the opponent's sunflower. The deity thought he had won, but among the 4 flowers here, none was the sunflower, including those with Lesa and Kurlik in the distance. Actually, it was the 5th flower that a withdrawn teammate had left behind, so the cats hadn't taken it. Originally, Dark ran at the front because he wanted to avoid the cats more than anyone else, deliberately letting the cats attack and then, using the sandstorm as cover, tossed the bright flower to Faye. The game wasn't over yet. The deity would continue to prevent Faye's progress, but he was too careless. Lesa had used the poison flower to counteract everything, causing all the deity's soldiers, including Mahatan, to be stunned for 5 seconds. That amount of time might not be enough for a normal person, but Kurlik was different. She had enough power to send him flying to the top. Faye flew high and placed the flower on the platform. Faye received the victory prize, the sunflower. The deity, having completed his business, was also about to leave. Faye went to thank Nina. He knew everything about the bet between her and Dark. He could bring her into his team, but as a partner, there was a deity named Bookmaker who, when fought, would reduce the number of losses, successfully helping gamers turn around and continue to fight other deities. However, only those designated by former deity statues could dive to Bookmaker. Unfortunately, there was none at the Maria branch. The statue at Ruin had been gathering dust for 40 years now. Faye wanted to challenge, using one of his wins to exchange for an opportunity for Nina to challenge Bookmaker. It was somewhat risky, not for Nina but for Faye. He was the only one with a chance for 10 wins after a streak of 6. Trading such a valuable victory would feel heavy-handed. Pearl stepped up to offer one of her wins in exchange, but he stopped her. Lesa saw no problem with it. Just do as he liked. Accepting this favor, Nina would only accept it once. She promised to bring back victory. They all boarded the train, each with their own thoughts. Seeing her distracted, Pearl had the idea to tease a bit, then realized that Faye was also thinking about the Bookmaker situation. Actually, Nina really cherished this opportunity. But more than that, she thought Faye should value his own victories more. The win rate when fighting against deities was 11%. 1 win equals 10 losses, and he could reach 10 wins and receive the deity's wish. He knew that, which is why he told her not to worry too much, because there would always be a chance to win. They didn't know what game Bookmaker would play, but everyone expected and believed victory was within reach. Lesa also tried to console her, but somehow it turned into pressure for Nina. Everyone had returned to Ruin, and the first thing to do was meet Miranda. As soon as they entered, Miranda recognized Nina as a very talented person. Nina greeted politely and brought small gifts for the host. They could schedule the earliest duel in 2 days. If Faye said there was a chance to win, it meant they would definitely win. Pearl invited the sisterhood to the dormitory for some partying and drinking. The bed in the room was so comfortable that Lesa couldn't help but fall into a deep sleep. 2 people on the same wavelength meeting each other pushes empathy to its limits. Pearl was like Nina. She was also trying to keep up with the 2 talented people ahead. They encouraged each other not to give up and to keep trying. But no matter what was said, with all this water spilled on them, they would have to take a bath anyway. At the mention of bathing, Lesa abruptly got up and went straight home. Lesa was strange. Whenever bathing was mentioned, she always avoided it. In Bookmaker's game, the Divine Eye lens couldn't be used, meaning no interference from outside was allowed. The day had come, and Nina had prepared mentally to enter this battle. This was a multidimensional space reflecting the heart, created from Nina's heart. Materializing her insecurities, the light on the ceiling was so strong because Nina had a strong aspiration for the future. From within the darkness, another Nina stepped out and began the battle. In the past, the deity had up to 200 different names given by humans. Faye wanted to confirm how many wins he was betting. If he won that many times, would he get that many reductions in losses? So he bet 3 times. Nina had never heard of this before, but Lesa didn't object because she thought it was fine. For the first time in history, someone had bet so much. Starting the match, Grima proposed playing poker. From now on, all advice or encouragement was forbidden. Faye was only watching from the outside, but still grasped the situation and calculated various paths. Nina discarded 3 cards, meaning both Nina and Grima were holding a pair, aiming for 3 of a kind or better. However, Nina was at a disadvantage. Her hand was a pair of 5s, almost the weakest possible, and the chance of Grima holding a weaker pair was very low. Currently, Nina had to use all her senses or abilities to win. Each person had 5 chips to bet. Nina put in 1 chip first, while Grima bet all of his. Was he that confident in his hand? Now Nina could only call and go all in, or fold. If she called, both sides would put in all their chips and determine the winner right there. If she folded, refusing the opponent's bet, she would lose 2 chips, keep 3, and move on to the next round. Had Grima really arranged a strong hand? Or was he just pretending so she would fold? Nina stood at a life or death choice. Everything around her seemed to fade away, leaving only her with the urgent calculations to solve. Nina concluded that this was clearly a trap. It was absurd for a deity like Grima to decide victory or defeat in less than a minute. Nina chose to fold, and indeed, Grima had picked up a higher card. If she had taken the risk earlier, she would have received a fatal blow. This time, both bet 1 chip, and Nina changed 4 cards. Ace was the strongest number. In the worst case, she would only get 1 pair. But if it was a pair of aces, it would depend on the opponent's hand. Grima changed 1 card, making Nina think the other 4 had already been paired. She couldn't tell if the opponent was acting or being genuine. Could she rely on intuition to continue this time? She intended to bet 1 chip, but Grima had blocked the way out. The opponent wanted her to put in 3 chips. Nina chose to fold again, but unfortunately, Grima's hand wasn't as good as Nina thought, not even having a single pair. If Nina had been a bit more daring earlier, she would have won for sure. But it seemed Nina didn't want to. Initially, Nina only aimed not to lose, so she was easily deceived. She should have said she would win from the beginning. Nina was afraid that if she lost, she would lose the number of wins bet by her teammates, so she didn't dare take risks. Yet she dared to think she could win. Nina had only 1 chip left and couldn't fold anymore. If her hand in the next round was stronger, that would be fine, but if it was weaker, she would be unlucky. Nina changed 1 card. Under the pressure of Grima's words, she decisively revealed her hand. And as expected, she lost everything. Instead of avoiding defeat, Nina should have used tactics to secure victory. In the previous round, she should have changed 1 card to bluff the opponent. Nina was too weak, so weak that it made the person across from her begin to pity her. The game had 3 chances, 1 for a decisive move, 1 for tears, and 1 for despair. She had wasted them all. Nina was so angry with herself that she fainted. It had been a long time since someone came to challenge him, so Grima had expected something more. Because it was the number of wins entrusted by teammates, she couldn't lose, so she didn't dare take risks. Grima easily took away Faye's 3 wins. This battle was truly disappointing. But for Faye, this was just the beginning. As Grima was about to leave, Faye called him back. From the moment the opponent accepted the challenge, the outcome had already been determined. This result was completely within Faye's expectations. Now was the moment to hand over the stage for him to play. He bet his remaining 3 wins. If he lost, he would give them to Grima. But if he won, Grima would have to deduct 3 losses for Nina. Grima accepted the challenge. In an instant, the illusory wall shattered, and the space changed to reveal a casino game board. Welcome to the deity's casino. The game was called 3 Cheats, created by Grima himself. Grima stepped out with a different form. This elements changed based on the people who came to challenge the deity. This was the first time the deity's casino was shown, proving that Faye was something special. This form was chosen by Grima from someone who had recently arrived, specifically 40 years ago. The first game, guess the face of the coin, with victory or defeat based on figuring out the cheat that the deity had arranged. Grima would use only one type of cheating. Who would explain the cheat to the 3 ladies? If all accepted, they would play. They agreed. After hearing it, Lesa held her stomach, nearly dying of laughter. Of course, they all agreed. Starting the first game, Faye would choose the coin to use, and he selected a black and white one. For fairness, all 3 games would be managed by his teammates. First was Nina. Grima handed her the coin. Nina placed it on her foot and tossed it, confident she could control the force and make him win. Very quickly, the coin was kicked high into the air. Faye quickly guessed heads, and Nina received the signal and kicked it down. But the coin stopped spinning and showed tails. Clearly, Grima hadn't made any strange movements. He accepted defeat and requested to quickly move on to the next game. The next game wouldn't use coins. The 5 cards received at the beginning could only be exchanged once, and then the winner would be determined. The next manager was Lesa. The cards were complete with no strange signs at all. If all 3 games used the same type of cheating, then if the coin had issues, the deck of cards in the poker game should also have something. Yet how could Lesa not see anything? If so, the possibility of the deity using power to interfere was very low. The next game, Faye played just to find out the deity's rules and tricks. He also lost completely in the second round, as predicted. Grima's 5 cards showed very clear favoritism. Moving to the third game, Pearl was so nervous she knocked the deck of cards flying. Faye looked through them once and found nothing suspicious, yet they still lost. How was that possible? The cards were divided into 2 halves at the edges of the table. On his side, there was 1 extra card. The deity let Faye draw first. He successfully matched a pair. It was Grima's turn, and he saw Pearl secretly trying to hint at cards for Faye, but didn't stop her. If possible, Pearl could come over and check if there was anything unusual about the cards. Pearl actually went over to check. Strangely, there was nothing unusual except for the overwhelming beauty of the body that the deity had chosen as a vessel. The result was still Grima claiming victory. Now was the decisive moment. What was the deity's cheat? Faye recalled a series of actions by everyone from the beginning of the event until now. Faye closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he decided to do it once more, getting revenge in the Find the Queen game, and asked Pearl to deal the cards again. Not to stall for time, but to put an end to Grima's winning streak. Like before, Faye still had more cards, but until the end, Faye didn't draw the Joker, but successfully paired cards, leaving the mine for Grima to enjoy himself. Grima's cheating plan was to turn Faye's 3 partners into allies. To realize this, he relied on his observation skills. When playing Find the Queen, the strategy to win was to make the opponent draw the Joker, meaning the cheat only occurred when someone had the Joker in hand. Next was Pearl dealing unfavorable cards to Faye, then standing behind the deity, seemingly to watch, but actually using a rise to swap cards. In the final round, since it had been more than 3 minutes since dealing the cards, Pearl could no longer teleport. So the stalling and dealing closely was just a bit of a bluff. And earlier, when drawing, Grima was so complacent he didn't even shuffle the cards, so Faye just took them. As for why he knew Nina would lose yet still pushed her to take 3 chances, it was because Faye wanted everyone to reach 10 wins simultaneously. As teammates, with the same destination, even if they lost, they would have the same number of wins. When they returned, they were welcomed not with applause, but with terrible news. Over 200 disciples had been forcibly gathered into a giant maze, and after 57 hours, not one had returned. Everyone panicked and began to form rescue teams. Faye's team was selected from the Ruin branch. This game didn't release losers back to the real world, but forced them to play again until they won. Now there were 2 ways, either find items in the maze or clear this game. They quickly entered the game. There were two choices regarding the intensity of being killed: favored player and forced to die. While Faye and Lesa chose the forced to die difficulty, the other two only chose the lighter one. To return to the real world, they had to complete the game at a high difficulty level, so he wanted to try a bit. Just entering the game, due to Pearl's overwhelming overconfidence, she had already failed once. Pearl had been battered 9 times. On the 20th attempt, she finally managed to dodge, but before she could celebrate, she was counterattacked. They continued moving until they came to a large pit that gave the impression something was about to jump out. But looking inside, they saw nothing. The fact that even apples could attack while a hole this big was harmless made them waver. They had reached the maze of the deity Rusenia. The game's MIP appeared to explain the rules. As everyone had already experienced, dying once meant starting over from the beginning. The mission was to defeat the boss deep in the forest to win. The maze contained traps and useful items for conquering it. By combining 2 or more items, higher quality items could be crafted. One could carry a maximum of 2 items at once. If anyone in the group was reborn, the items they carried would also disappear, and both the boss and bypass traps would reset. The only things kept were the insights gained from previous resurrections, and the areas already opened would remain accessible. Above everyone's head was the progress of completing the level. If no one had questions, they would officially enter the game. Faye wanted to know how to escape. Mip replied they had to defeat the final boss or arrange items in a specific way. Both items and conquering bodies would remain intact, even when the body returned to the human world. Mip began to tell the story of the maze origin. Long ago, Rusenia had enthusiastically built this maze waiting for humans to come. But no one ever came to conquer it, so it eventually froze from waiting too long. However, the maze still maintained a fairly good state, so everyone just needed to focus on defeating the boss. They quickly entered the game and collected the first item. Thinking it was good, they unexpectedly found it was a sweet candy trap. In the end, the whole group was ambushed by a seemingly harmless creature. They had to start again from the beginning. Because they chose the difficult level, they were now no different from the previously lost players. This time, Nina would have her revenge. She raised her foot high and performed a dragon-revealing kick, acquiring another item. Just when they thought it was over, Nina was sneak attacked and sent back to the starting point. Faye established a rule not to blame teammates, but to move forward together. Pearl quickly used the acquired item to create a mirror. Faye crafted an alarm clock that would make a loud noise to wake monsters for attack. Lesa made a horn, while Nina crafted an umbrella. Although they didn't know the uses, they carried them anyway. Here, Faye encountered old teammates and sat down to exchange information. People exchanged items and created a key that led to the door at the end of the corridor. Inside was nothing, not even the monster alarm rang. But Nina still heard something, a soft breathing, indicating it was dozing. The only way to proceed was to wake the boss. Faye and Lesa held their instruments together, preparing to blow. After the harsh sound rang out, the roof had a large hole punched through it, and the boss descended from the sky, spearing players to death. Perhaps the seniors would have some treasure to deal with situations like this. After all, they had been here longer than the 3. Indeed, there were enough items for everyone. This time, they couldn't be carelessly speared to death again. No sooner had they said this than Faye and his teammates returned to the starting line due to a pathetic death just like before. They had died nearly a dozen times, and they still couldn't find a way to counter that thing. Faye suggested that Nina use a physical skill to kick the falling object back up, which might allow them to escape. So Nina was pushed forward. She did exactly as planned but still failed. The point was that they collected important information. The falling objects were thousands of meteorites. Faye remembered the seemingly useless umbrella, which actually allowed them to pass this level. The boss had appeared. Its life points were 2 million, while each attack from the army only reduced it by 1 point. At this rate, even chipping away for 10 years wouldn't be enough. But it attacked everyone, and they all dodged, only it couldn't dodge itself. It was a case of using one's own weapon against oneself. Now they just needed to lure it to attack. Everyone tried to play like a group jump rope until its life dropped to just over 500. Nina rushed in, delivering 2 kicks combined with magic, causing the monster to be defeated by a young girl. In exchange, their reward was a resurrection bell, but not to resurrect them, rather, the monster. Nina accidentally made the bell ring, calling back the big boss with full health points. Just then, Yuros appeared. She had been looking for Faye for a long time, and had even gone to Bookmaker to erase a loss before coming here. She didn't notice she was sitting on the head of a ferocious monster until it roared. Yuros gave it a punch, directly sending the poor monster to reincarnation. From where the boss died, a sword appeared. It was just a game preservation item. Whenever they returned to play the game, they would be forcibly brought here again. In short, unless they retired, they could never escape. Actually, the final boss was that dead deity, but that deity had died ages ago. This was a game bug that put them at risk of being stuck here forever. First, they had to report to Miranda. everyone would still have to continue conquering the maze by going to the deepest part of the dungeon. They needed to verify if the final boss was truly dead. Faye let the others leave first to report the news and wait for a good opportunity to return. Yuros was warned for suddenly jumping in here out of nowhere. The next boss would be a bit harder to defeat, but Yuros was here. She said she would support everyone. She had just released a new game, so she was very hot. Her schedule was booked solid for the next 50 years, but if Faye liked, she could reluctantly make room for him to play. She didn't care if she got penalized or not. After all, they couldn't do anything to this deity. They kept walking until Yuros found a yellow button. She casually pressed it, and Pearl was immediately hit. It turned out to be pepper spray. Nina sensed something and warned everyone to be careful. A bad premonition came, but what emerged was completely the opposite: a tiny, adorable sprite. Seeing humans, the little one was so scared that she ran away as fast as she could. Under Pearl's feet suddenly appeared another NPC, but compared to its previous state, it now looked stranger, as if it had fallen ill. Before Lesa could think, it spewed waste directly onto her. Faye had to urge everyone to move quickly to escape this chaos. They saw the treasury room and were about to look for a key to open the door when, surprisingly, a beam of light appeared above their heads. The newcomer introduced himself as Brillen III, the most merciful angel of the maze, granting a wish to those who were lost. Pearl pointed to the door saying she wanted to go inside, but as he was preparing to cast his spell, he noticed the dirt on Nina's clothes. A successfully provoked good person, he annihilated Pearl and Nina, forcing the whole group to start over from the beginning. Currently, the conquest progress was at 6.6, and with no questions, Faye decided to try again to find more data. The bell of the sprite they had met earlier might be a signal to alert teammates. There was the sound of a waterfall nearby. Behind the water was a treasure chest holding valuable items, or so they thought. Actually, it was full of swimwear. Forgetting that frivolous area, they had to move forward. Despite being very careful, Pearl still fell victim to some apples, but this time, due to the maze influence, they were just ordinary apples, and they didn't have to resurrect. Brillen appeared again, this time promising to grant them a wish. Just when they thought it was over, Pearl was dirtied by an apple, so once again, he incinerated the entire team. Challenging for the third time, they were determined to get that guy's wish. The result was still failure. Who knew this old man would even count the previous games? They couldn't clean off the smell that had stuck to them. Suddenly, both of them had an idea. The stream they had passed earlier might also be a clue. They bathed and cleaned themselves thoroughly, then returned to the same spot, confidently calling Brilliant to open the treasury door. Inside was all gold, silver, and precious stones. They successfully received new items and unlocked the ability to carry more props. Now it was time for the final boss to appear. Below them was a trap door, bringing everyone into a mysterious space. Outside, Dark and Kurlik, in the name of the second rescue team, entered the game. This meeting was arranged by fate. Dark was looking forward to the encounter between the two. Indeed, the deity had died, but only needed to be resurrected. This dungeon had never limited death as the end. Players and monsters could all be reborn. Surely the deity could too. Faye took out the bell item. Pearl held it and rang it twice. But after a moment of waiting, nothing happened. However, the exploration points increased, meaning they had to go to every corner and defeat each boss for the deity to return. Perhaps they alone couldn't do it. But in this maze, there were up to 200 people, plus 50 members of the rescue team coming soon. They should gather them and share information. They met again at the shrine, where all treasures were shared. Pearl and 2 team members found an additional item that could make these brown little ones befriend players, so everyone set off. There were a total of 5 different teams cooperating in battle, not counting Faye's. Nina opened the door leading to the area hiding the boss. Not letting it escape, Yuros gave it a punch that knocked it out, resulting in her getting a red card and being sent off the field. Miraculously, the progress had reached 99.9. While Faye was still thinking, Pearl had already figured out the final mechanism. The condition was to roll dice until all showed the number 1. But these weren't 6-sided dice. The probability was 1 in 200 million. Even rolling until your hand broke might not succeed. At this moment, Dark appeared like a savior. He spent just 15 minutes cleaning the dice, and then 15 seconds to roll them, all showing the number 1. There might still be people trapped inside. They had to prioritize finding them first. However, the progress only jumped a little and stopped when it was still missing 0.01. Do you remember the first hole they had skipped? 4 people jumped down, and the progress immediately reached 100. It turned out that from the beginning, this was the shortcut to the deepest part of the maze. The deity was resurrected from stone. Anubis was the final boss of this game. Now they just needed to defeat her to go home. Anubis summoned all the bosses from the various levels. They unleashed all their powerful attacks toward Faye's group. But surprisingly, they were incredibly weak. They attacked themselves and suffered from their own blows. The result was that all were completely wiped out, leaving only Anubis and one boss standing motionless. It turned out this little one's weakness was stupidity. Pearl raised a giant cannon to deliver the final blow, but she still survived. Anubis summoned 100 more NPCs. But this move was useless. Lesa had an immunity card to avoid fighting with these round fluffy things. Surprisingly, she fired a beam at Faye, causing him and his teammates to be wiped out. Fortunately, they had the resurrection mirror item, so they didn't have to start over. Anubis continued to use moves that exhausted them. This trash game still managed to satisfy people. No wonder they were criticized as flat-brained. Faye cursed silently in his heart. Nina jumped up to shield the team from a fatal blow, but her leg was injured. Faye realized something and decided to hug her and leave the hall. Pearl opened a teleportation to evacuate everyone at the last minute, making everyone sigh with relief. When they returned, Anubis had stopped attacking. She landed with a satisfied appearance. She just wanted to confirm everyone's passion for the game. Now they had won.